Welcome to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. Join the podcast mogul Phil Better as he interviews successful entrepreneurs that make their living in the digital world. Now, let's join your host, Phil Better, and his special guest today on Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast.
Mute. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm, of course, your host with the most, Phil Better, and I am so excited to have a digital marketer with over 20 years of experience in the game, focusing in on Google Ads. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Joe Balestrino to the show. Joe, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Phil. I appreciate it.
So I'm just going to jump right into it. Joe, how did you get started in the world of entrepreneurship? Like what lit your fire?
Well, I always wanted to do something and I never knew what it was. So I'm an old dude by my kid standards. And so when I was growing up, the internet was just coming around, right? So I'm Gen X. And, when the internet came around, I would go to the local library because, back then most people couldn't afford a computer. And so I would go to the local library and I would just mess around on the internet to kind of find out what it's all about, what you can do on it. And I came across this website called Homestead, and it would let you build websites, right? You can mess around. And back then it was kind of quirky. You'd have a little counter to gauge how many people came to your website, little gifts that did thing. The websites really didn't do anything that I could design, but it kind of piqued my interest as to what I could possibly do. And then that's how I discovered multi-level marketing. And I tried to do some of that multi-level marketing. I printed out flyers, go hang them up on poles. I'm from New York, so that's what we did. Put cars, flyers on cars and things like that. But none of those things ever really stuck. And I just kept trying. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to do something. And at one point I had downloaded a copy of Adobe Go Live and started messing around with, how to design websites. And I taught myself how to kind of design what, back then was considered a website, which wasn't great. But everything was new. So Google was new. It was easy to rank. I was getting clients coming to me for web design, and they started asking me, how did you rank for affordable web design? And I really didn't know what that was. It wasn't a concept to me. And that's when I started to discover what SEO was. And then that kind of put me on the path of what I still do today, which is SEO and paid search. And that kind of pulled me off the path of web design and focused more on online marketing.
So this transition from designing websites, which we were doing before, to handling the ad spend for businesses, was that something you were easily able to do? Like it wasn't a hard transition for you? Like you were just like, oh, the skills are similar?
No, none of the skills, not even close. And it was hard because back then everything was new. So now you have YouTube and you have all these resources. Everybody's doing courses and all this stuff. Back then you didn't have any of that. And so when it came to web design, one thing that I learned early on was it's great to have a website, but if you can't market the website, and it's funny because it's still the same today, people will come to me and say, hey, Joe, I got this website, but, I don't know how to get traffic to it. And most people don't budget for marketing. Like they get an idea, they want to do a business, and the first step is website. But then they don't think about what's supposed to come after the website. They just focus on the website. And so I moved away from web design and worked more on the marketing side because it was one thing to help people design a website and build it for, to have SEO, but helping those who just created a website, actually drive business to the website was probably the more challenging part. And it goes hand in hand with web design. Like if back then we had Flash. So Flash was, how some websites were designed. High-end websites were designed on Flash, but Flash was essentially a big movie. So people would come to me and say, "Hey, Joe, I just spent $20,000 on a Flash website. Can you optimize it for search?" And the answer would be no, because Google can't read what's in that video file. You would have to break it up into HTML elements, and the developer didn't know that, and so it would cost the business owner more money to break that newly designed site up into two elements. And so that's when I decided to go into marketing, and I started a whole business which wasn't intentional, where I had a podcast, I had a forum, and I wrote blog posts to where I was educating people on what to do before, during, after they had their website built, so that they were positioning themselves the best they could to generate business.
I like that. You ended up helping a lot more, because a lot of people, everybody knows a website is the most important thing to a business. Like, having a website, having a presence online is so important, but it is the back end. Like, yes, it can be all pretty, but if you don't rank in Google, you don't use those services, no one's going to find your pretty website. No one's going to find it. So, and I do remember the era of the Flash website on dial-up modems were not fun. But what is one of the biggest situations you see when clients come to you looking to start ranking using Google AdWords and that?
I think the biggest challenge is a lot of people have the perception that they want to test with a small budget, thinking if they can make a little bit of money, produce lots of money, then they'll spend more money. But the issue is, if somebody will come to me and say, "I want to spend $50 a day," but they have 200 keywords, it's never going to happen, because that little bit of budget has to stretch across all of these keywords. And so think about it. You run ads today, depending on what the cost per click is, you may only get 2 or 3 clicks. And those 2 or 3 clicks against 100 keywords, let's say, some keywords will get clicked today, some keywords will get clicked tomorrow, maybe a different set the next day, the different set the next day. And the whole point of Google Ads is to determine which keywords are producing leads, spend more money on them, and then stop spending money on the keywords that don't. But when you are limited by budget, not only do your ads not show all the time because you're running out of budget before it gets in front of enough people, but there's so many different keywords that things are getting, different keywords are getting clicked. And so you're not collecting that data. And so what'll happen is, at the end of 30 days, 60 days, it's not uncommon for people to say, "Well, Google Ads doesn't work." And it's because you didn't take a reasonable amount of keywords or a reasonable size budget and put the money, time and effort in. And a lot of people don't research exactly how much money they need to invest, because it's an afterthought. It's, "Oh, I'm going to do SEO," but SEO is going to take a long time. But the thing with SEO is, and it's the same as it was 20 years ago. Back then, people would say, "Joe, I want you to rank my website," and we would rank them. And then the next issue would be, "Well, I rank number 1 for my keywords, but I'm not generating any business." And if you run Google Ads, you'll realize very quickly that even if you advertise on 10 or 15 keywords, they probably generate about 100 different searches, a day, that are relevant to the keywords that you're targeting. And not all of them are going to produce business. So assuming what keywords are going to, you should rank for, if you look at the Google Ad side, you realize that maybe those keywords that you thought would drive you business actually don't. And then I usually take the keywords that perform really well on Google Ads and turn that into an SEO strategy, versus trying to guess what the keywords should be. Even though you can do research and come up with what the competition is and all that stuff, it really doesn't matter. And a good example is, years ago when I started in the industry, Google didn't mind or didn't care or didn't know that some people would pay, they would create multiple Google Ads accounts. I had a client one time had multiple ad accounts, and they sold the same product with the same pricing. the same website. The website was exactly the same. The only thing that was different was the domain name and the colors. So everything else was the same. But the red site did better on certain keywords than the blue site. And the blue site did better on certain keywords than the green site. And so you can't just go by what you think. I let the data guide me in Google Ads, find out what keywords do really well, and then say, okay, these keywords are generating sales. How can I use this data to create an SEO strategy versus spending 6, 12, 18 months trying to rank for a keyword that we later find out that, this doesn't generate business.
So your advice to people who are to entrepreneurs when they're starting is to look for the keywords that bring in money instead of just looking to rank number one on Google.
Yeah, because some people, if you do, like cleaning services, you may assume that cleaning services is the keyword that you should rank for, but maybe it's maid services, maybe it's cleaning company. It could be any keywords. There's so many different ways people search, but when people do SEO, they usually go after the keywords that are the most competitive or they think are going to drive the most business. But more competitive just means it's going to take you longer to get there. And if it takes you all this time to get there and it's not the right keyword, then you spend all this money and effort to rank for a keyword that doesn't bring business. But with Google Ads, you can find out relatively quickly what keywords are driving business and then work on the SEO versus, because now you don't have to guess. Now you have data that says that this was what generates business for you.
A great shortcut for any business to figure out what their SEO strategy. Would you say, let's say a new business just starting out, what kind of budget would you say versus the number of keywords they want to rank for? Like, how would you say, like 10 keywords a try?
It's a loaded question. Like every industry is different. Every industry is different. So if you have a lawyer who works, so if a crane falls in New York City, right, and somebody needs to call an attorney, that if that attorney gets that call and he gets that client, it could be millions of dollars. And so competing to get in front of that keyword is going to cost way more than somebody who's offering a cleaning service because the price point is cheaper. The amount of money that they're going to make is cheaper. So it's all in relation to what it is that you do and how much you stand to make. If you sell real estate and the average you make on a home is $15,000, you can't expect to spend $20 a day to make that $15,000. So it's all in relation. But one thing I can say is if you whatever you do, if you're an SEO or you're a plumber or electrician or let's take home remodeling. If you do home remodeling is what you do as a whole, but you may do kitchen remodeling and bathroom remodeling. And so each one of those is different, right? Because somebody who wants kitchen remodeling is going to want, before and after photos. They're going to want to see, the work that you've done, and probably the work that's involved is going to be different than the work that's involved when you do a bathroom remodeling. So you would separate those. And so if you're on limited budget, instead of trying to advertise, home remodeling, kitchen remodeling, bathroom remodeling, you focus on either the type of work you want the most of, either because you enjoy it or because it generates more income for you. Then I would focus money on that one area, fine tune it until you're profitable and you're making money, and then move over to something else. Because a lot of times what people do is when they make the most money, that's when you should take extra money, and test something and try something else. A lot of people come to me when they're already they can't get performance. They have poor performance, or they need more business because they relied on one avenue to get all their leads from, and now they're in a bind because now they've only focused on one thing. So, my advice would be to, focus on one thing as far as ads, but as far as your marketing, you should be having your hands in as many different channels as possible, because if one dries up, or, if you're relying on SEO and then you get hit with a penalty, or there's a technical error and your site gets delisted for some reason, you're not just relying on that one source. You have other sources to drive leads from.
Great piece of advice. I would like to know, do you have a memory, either how being a digital entrepreneur has been giving you been able to help you reach a goal that you've always wanted to have, or maybe a goal that you were able to help a client with?
I mean, digital marketing allows me to work from home, right? I started out running an agency. I sold it. I worked for an agency. I worked on the client side, and for the last 7, 8 years, I've been consulting and working from home is nice. I've moved out to the suburbs. The kids are, I'm able to take the kids to school, after school activities. There's more flexibility in that, and for me, that outweighs, anything else. I don't have to deal with a commute, and any of that stuff that I had to do years ago. And for clients, I have dozens of case studies over the years. They're not all winners, but I helped one gentleman who came to me. He had a power washing company in Florida. And when he came to me, he said, "Joe, I need business. I'm about to go bankrupt because I can't generate business." So the cut out the long part of the story, at the end of everything that I did for him in about 6 months, he went from struggling to not being able to produce business to selling his business in 6 months, because what he was doing was incorrect. He was sending people with keywords to just a blank page with a form on it, which nobody was filling out. He wasn't tracking phone calls. He wasn't targeting the right keywords. And he was telling me that, when I asked him who his audience was, he's like, "Oh, they're older people who, can't get on their roofs and power wash." And when I started looking at the data, he was partially right. When I listened to the phone calls, it wasn't the older people that were calling. It was the children of the older people. So the children were calling for the parents. And so while on his perspective, it was older people he was servicing, but it was the younger people who were calling. So I was able to adjust where we spent the money to focus in on that younger generation and spend less on the older generation, because they were costing more, because most likely most of the time they weren't the ones that were calling. And so he was able to turn around and sell his business after just 6 months.
Oh, that's a friggin' awesome case study, and
Yeah.
how you understand, and it showcases like the people who are taking your products or services may not be the ones who are initially looking for you online. Like in this case, yeah, he was servicing older family members, but they may not be the ones jumping at it. I love how you got to look at the second layer, see if there was a second layer to the situation. Um, we're coming up to the spark question of the show by Seek Discomfort. So today's spark question, which is to spark conversation between strangers because they're just friends you haven't met yet, is: have you ever spent a day without your phone? And if yes, how did it feel?
Recently, or like, I'm old. So you mean before there was phones, or
Where you be not before there were phones. Let's go within the last 10 years. Let's go in the last decade. Has there been a time where you just spent zero time with your phone?
No, impossible. Impossible, because my phone is connected to family and to work. So it's kind of, unfortunately, my lifeline, which, that sparks, um, you know, where I'm working on moving my office downstairs so that I'm not, because right now my work is portable. It's a laptop. So
Mhm.
I'm working on getting a desktop. So the plan is to sit and work and then walk away. Where right now my laptop's with me all the time. So I'm 12 hours, 14 hours on the computer. And maybe, after that question, maybe my phone should be left in the office so that, I'm spending less time on it.
Ooh, maybe a change is coming, folks, on the show. Joe, I'm going to jump off the screen here. I want you to let my audience know where they can find you, where they can follow you, support you, and if they need help with their Google Ads. The floor, sir, is yours.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. JoeBalestrino.com. You can reach out. You can take out, look at all my services that I have, mostly SEO, paid search. There's some blog content. I offer one-on-one coaching. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit. And that's pretty much the best way to get a hold of me.
Excellent. Joe, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today. It was a pleasure talking with you and providing those amazing tips for how it's better to rank search first for the ones that bring in the keywords that bring in business before you start trying to rank for the ones that don't. So thank you so much for sharing that with my audience.
Yep, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
To my audience, as you know, in the show notes down below, you'll find all the links to Joe. Connect with him and use him if you're looking for some Google AdWords or any sort of ads. He's probably the guy to go check out. So thank you very much for listening, and remember to always invest in yourself.